Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I am Anara Tabashaliva, along with co-hosts Dr. Victor Fett, Dr. Katerina Shrey, and our program producer, Professor Larry Sherry. We host a weekly discussion panel on Russia's war on Ukraine with guests from Ukraine, military experts, medical personnel, academics, artists, literary figures, and relief workers. Our panel is recorded and circulated nationally and internationally. We appreciate your comments and feedback. Special thanks to Marshall University Libraries and MUIT for making this weekly event possible. If you are joining us live on Teams, please feel free to use the chat to post any question for our guests. A quick greetings to our viewers in Ukraine from Dr. Katerina Shrey.
Вітаємо наших слухачів в Україні з глибоким покліном. Ми далі свідки вашого страшного терпіння і також вашої великої сили. Дякую вам за вашу участь в нашій тижневій програмі.
Thank you, Katerina. Today's guest will be introduced by Dr. Victor Fett.
Thank you, Anara, and I will introduce myself because I'm today's guest, and we also have our regular viewers here. We have joining Marina Okhrimovskaya from Zurich, Switzerland. Thank you, Maria, for being with us. And we have Yana Kane from New Jersey, poet and translator. And we will be talking about, I will be talking about poetry and book publishing. And let me bring on screen my presentation right now. We're talking about a book series called Year of Poetry in Russian language, God poezii, which has been published in Kyiv in Russian language for the last 4 years, starting from the first year of full-scale war. I had an honor of being an editor of this book. It has been published by a wonderful publishing house of Oleg Fedorova, who publishes in Ukrainian and in Russian. I hear from Oleg that yesterday there was a fire in neighboring houses. He is safe, his people are safe. Today we do not have some of our regular viewers from Kyiv because of fiber optic network damaged in some districts. Our regular contributor, Dr. Strizhak from Chemistry Department, Academy of Sciences, reports that Institute of Biophysics is burning from the attacks. As everybody knows, today is the day of mourning. But we salute the heroes, and we are doing what we can do to support our friends, to support fighting Ukraine, fighting for its independence. And those of us who cannot fight physically can fight with our words. And these words may be in any language. It just happened that I was involved in this project. Our covers, by the way, are by wonderful Nikolai Sologub from Kyiv. Here is his studio and auto-portrait. And this today is a progress report on a new volume. Usually each volume of this anthology or almanac, it's better to call anthology probably, because it includes annually up to 100 authors from across the world and approximately 600 pages. So we fit a lot of people who want to be in it. It's mostly poetry, but also some kind of critical essays. And as I said, for 4 years, we published it only in Russian language. The authors excluded by the war conditions those who are located in Russia itself, although there are people who write anti-war poetry. We take people from all over the world, excluding Russia and Belarus. Many of our authors are Ukrainian citizens living in Ukraine, writing in Russian language, which may be second or the only language for them. We include anyone from diaspora, from Europe, from America, from Canada, from Israel, anyone who wants to contribute. And this is what I was doing for the last 4 years. On fifth year, we decided slightly to change the format and include texts written in Ukrainian language. Obviously, most of them are coming from Ukraine itself, but also from Ukrainian refugees, immigrants, and others. We project, again, up to 100 authors from across the world. As of today, we have about 70 people contributing, more than half of the book ready. It is co-edited by wonderful Irina Yurchuk, who is living for many years in Germany. She is fully bilingual, and she's from Kharkiv. Irina couldn't be with us today, but I will I talk to her all the time. She's in charge of editing and evaluating Ukrainian texts in Ukrainian language. Here is a cover of her own book published last year by the same publisher, and it's a unique and experimental book. It's called Nadzemny Perehid, which means the overpass, like rail station overpass. And it is bilingual book, which includes Irina's own poems in both languages, and also her translations from Russian to Ukrainian of 17 authors across the world, her favorite, who write in Russian and whose word she values, so that she decided to bring them across this bloody divide, across this damaged highway of history, or whatever your favorite metaphor is. Today I will read a few translations. I decided that we will not read in Russian or Ukrainian today to save time, but of course, talking about poetry, I need to include poems. Most poems in our anthology are classical in the tradition of metered and rhymed verse, and we all know that translations in meter and rhyme do not always work in English, so many of these may sound very old-fashioned, but as it is, here is Irina Yurchuk's own poem, Day 360 Crucified, translated by Elena Einhorn. I will read. At first we reckoned just few days, and now counting the years. The murky mud of morning wells and dying light that war expels, the rhymes suspended at frontiers of timeless spells. Mistake was made in our forecast. We're not so good at fortune telling. Believe in darkness soon shall pass. This madness sure couldn't last. When heaven's blown up by shelling, no home of ours left untouched, nor soul not dwelling. How many dead, how many fallen. We cannot fathom such a loss. Where even silence is forgotten, the pile of ruins grows and grows, and rescue squads and fire trucks and medics rushing in the dark, despite distractions. Air strikes, behold, life's holding its formation from ashes, our cities spike, and earth still steady in rotation, because of warriors in the trenches, in dirt, in mud, our guardian angels, because without their fight, without their strength and might, no peace will hold, we cannot fail, for spring is bound to prevail, that day when war will yield to light. 360 Crucified. The format of anthology, annual or one-time book, which would embrace many authors. Of course, it's classical format, but I need to say that in my native language, which is Russian, I learned in Siberia through my childhood, although I was born in Ukraine myself. In this tradition, we do have this editing, publishing tradition of free poetry anthologies, which were coming out in different countries. A couple of covers here are rare books I learned from. I took them as an example. A famous anthology in the West, put together by Yuri Ivask a few years after the Second World War. Another called The Fellowship. These are two American anthologies. We need to remember people who were maintaining this tradition. Valentina Sienkiewicz, by birth from Ukraine. She was in Philadelphia for years. She was maintaining the almanac annual encounters. I was lucky to know her personally. And several other annual almanacs, all in Russian language, right now are being published in California, Philadelphia. The Coast has been published by Igor Mikhailovich Kaplan for 20 years, and Day of Russian Expat Poetry by Vladimir Batshev in Frankfurt, which I also helped with in first 4 years of this publication. Julia Nemirovskaya from the States wrote in one of our Year of Poetries on the Kapilka project. We're lucky to have these translators with us. We have them regularly on this program, and we'll have again, and Yana Kane may say a few words about Kapilka. They have published 2 anthologies in English. These are translations from Russian and also Ukrainian. So these are other projects existing. I will just show faces of some of our authors across the world. Some of them have a slash between, like Israel and Ukraine or Germany and Ukraine. It means that they are originally from Ukraine and moved to other country either earlier as immigrants or these days, you may say refugees or people fleeing the war in 2022. Others are still there. Nikolai Labanov in Kyiv edits another anthology, bilingual. It's called Artelen, and right now, Under the Shells, 18th book is being published. Nikolai is also one of our authors. As I said, we have up to 100 people every year. Andrei Kostinsky, translated by Yana Kane. Yana, if you hear me, maybe since you are here, you can read.
Certainly. Let's see. Can I turn my camera on? Let's see.
You know this text better than I do.
Okay, let me see if I can. Okay. So, yes, Andrei Kostinsky lives in Kyiv, Ukraine. And in the early days of the war, of the full-scale invasion, a rocket struck his home, and this poem reflects that. I live as if within this world I am no more. I shake an offered hand, respond to words that make no sense. Above my head, sun like the sun, the moon glints from a well, a bucket deeply sunk. Memory immolated ashes ankle high around my feet. At checkpoints, residence papers, cigarettes. Should I and myself meet, I'd say one of us is no longer here. I call, am called, uncalled, approach the caller. A skylined window framing an empty space. I search the courtyard in the post-explosion rubble. There may be keepsakes of a life that's now erased. I found plush toys, a bunny and a mouse. A shockwave swept them off the sinking floors. Teремок world sheltering them allows my murdered home to enter fairy tale doors. So Andrei Kostinsky is a bilingual poet. He writes both in Ukrainian and in Russian, and he's also a translator. He translates from a number of Slavic languages, including Russian. And you know, this is, and you know, in this poem he mentions Teремok, which comes from a Russian folktale. So I think this poem is very much makes that distinction that we were talking about, that Katerina was talking about in the beginning, and Marina, where inhabiting languages and living, making one's home in many languages has nothing to do, well, little to do with how people misuse these languages, or, you know, yeah, so there is a difference, and I really admire the ability to retain enough clarity to make that difference.
If I can jump in just for a second, I think people on the program who watch regularly know that my grandmother was Russian. I'm Ukrainian, but my grandmother was Russian. And I, as a child, I remember, forgive my pronunciation, but it's this like terim terim terimok tov terimi живет. It's this.
Yes.
This is one of the childhood stories that I heard, and it's here in this poem. I think it's such a beautiful and fitting reference because of like the innocence of that of a childhood story. And I think in that story, I think like first a fly, then a mouse, then a frog,
Yes.
and like it, and so it just, and then finally like this bear comes and they collapse. But it's just a cute story. It's a cute story. It does like it's a cute story, and so the contrast here between the what the poet Kostinsky is writing about and that reference is very stark. It's very effective. It's a very, very skillfully done way to embed and harken back to something familiar culturally, clearly beyond just Russian children. So thank you so much for reading that so beautifully.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, and yeah, that's what poems call out to me to translate them. And this spoke to me so much about this feeling of retaining connection to the language and the fairy tales and the poetry and so on of one's childhood, while completely not aligning with what some of the people who speak this language are doing today. So
Thank you, Ian. This is very well said. This is exactly what we are talking about, not for the first time, not for the last in this program. Retention of the language, or the best parts of the language being usurped by aggressors and criminals, and the total critical mass that is needed to keep the best. Distance, of course, is not just geographical. Expat, we use this word all the time. Distance also is temporal. Russian language, for those on our program who do not know, is very young. If you project 100 years ago, it was a special time just after communist revolution, retention in emigration and in Russia of the best that was left of so-called Silver Age. Roll back another 100 years. You'll find yourself in the middle of so-called Golden Age, 1826. But it is 1 year after the first and the last unsuccessful military coup in Russian history, so-called Decembrists uprising. But if you roll it back another 100 years, 1726, a year after Peter the Great died, there will be none of this that we cherish today. So compared to English, Latin, not even mentioning ancient languages, what we are observing is recent, young, and rapid history of change. And I'm not a linguist, I'm just making my naturalistic observation of time and space changes, which Charles Darwin called evolution. So let's continue. We will have more time for discussion. Here are some faces from Israel, and also Boris Khersonsky, one of the leading poets from Ukraine, now residing in Italy. He writes almost every day. I will talk more about dynamics of writing. It has changed profoundly. It's not neutral anymore. Here's another poem by Lviv, by origin Boris Fabrikant from UK, translated by his daughter Elizaveta Tolubeeva, having some of the most heart-wrenching images I have seen in our books. That's a translation, of course. The living wars, immortal children's line, so tender, tearful, laughing bright as gold, with neither flags or marches, not a sign, waltz on beyond the final border cold. They will not grow, no clothing do they need. A lullaby alone is drifting near, yet in its song are sirens' cries that bleed, and aircraft engines rumbling through the air. Beneath their song, the mortal ranks have slept. They cannot tell how life from death apart, nor know the fate that broken, twisted, webbed, was torn away and scattered from the heart. Could you, O Lord, keep looking in their eyes and never turn your gaze or look aside when meeting them beyond the shattered skies, past ruined walls where all their childhood died? Beautifully translated, beautifully written in the original, and connects us to many lines. Radislav Guslin is in Portugal. Galina Itzkovich, who has been on our program many times, also a member of Kapilka Translation Group. She is in New York. Inna Kwasivka is in Odessa, and her poems, very beautiful, very tragic, have been translated also. I'm talking now about translation connections as well. Last poem, or close to last, I want definitely to include is by Irina Yurchuk, translated by another Kapilka member, Olega Fedorova from the Netherlands. We have very international network here. Irina herself is in Germany since the first weeks of full-scale war, and this is probably one of the most famous poems written from the person of the dead man. Look, would you look at that, he says. There round the corner to the left, the water tower is in flames, the tower is already dead. Remember our good old bookshop with ghosts of Whitman, Frost, or Southey? It shuddered yesterday in shock and spewed all guts out of its mouth. And the pond where I used to freak you out with a bug on a plank, all that remains is a wrecked grill and all dusted with grey ashy sand. Those hosts, ye hosts, killed everything where we once lived, that we once loved. They whose eyes are bright, aglow with greed, blew up, robbed, cut all that they passed. And I am dead myself, you know, no more than a bad videotape. Instead of mine wore-out coat, I wear a soldier's camouflage. Don't touch, I'm trash, I'm really filth. Not waiting for your tears to drop, nor coming to the light. You will freeze, seeing my head split out by a bomb. I'm just a body, interlaced with nameless bodies in a pit. And to be honest, I'm here against the wall, too hesitant to call you at the wrong time, here in darkness, pleading from afar. You are the only one who can identify me by my scar. Some answers to questions which probably will be asked and are asked actually all the time from me and my co-authors, co-editors. How and why are you doing this? We started doing this type of anthology just as a gesture of support for Ukraine. We obviously decided, just like in this podcast, which runs weekly since March 22, we decided to use our skills as organizers, editors, networkers who understand and can use technology of remote exchange. But during these 4 years of very fast history, in our case, both the authors and the texts have changed. Some poets of older generation are not with us anymore. Some were killed in the war, not necessarily older ones. We have a memorial section I will talk about. Others have fallen silent because they cannot write in Russian anymore. We do not have any more incidental themes. Light humor is not of this season. At the same time, there's enormous amount of poetry being written, and others can testify to this. So we had a chance to select. We stopped publishing number of non-essential texts, and in particular, we decided not to publish translations into Russian. That's back burner stuff today. Many authors have written so much that it's hard to select. And the language has changed also. Fury, pain, rage, of course, but also we see a lot of contempt, not just tiredness, but contempt for the enemy. You can read it in some historical novels like Tolstoy's of Caucasus, conquered by Russians. There is much less rhetoric of wartime. The war for my generation meant Second World War, and the words like pre-war meant 1930s, whatever kind of peaceful time it was. My grandmother actually said that peaceful time ended in 1914 for her. Language of the wartime heroism has been co-opted by the aggressor. We cannot use this language anymore as we did back even in the 70s or 80s. There are new ways of documenting the horror beyond anything we have seen before. And one of the most obvious changes, the divergent path of modern Russia and modern Ukraine, which was propagandized and sold to us as brotherly nations based on the shared Soviet past, the expressions like fratricidal war, and even illusions of reconciliation, starting from aphorisms like this too shall pass, and all this tinsel stuff is gone, is dried up. We cannot and we do not use these terms because it clearly will not pass in the way other things were passing for former generations. It will not be forgotten. What we see is, in my personal opinion, completely different section of human history, and I can talk about it much more than you need. Few faces of people we lost. Vlad Loza, who was in our first volume in 22, was killed in action in 24. He was 25 years old. Brilliant young poet and linguist. I had a chance to correspond with him a little bit. Elena Mudrova was killed in Kharkiv by Russian missile in March 24. We published her poems and we will publish more in translations. She wrote in Russian and her poems were translated into Ukrainian by Irina Yurchuk. Here is one translation by Maria Blostein, member of Kapilka group, into English. The sky was gone. I thought this wouldn't last. I left for home, and once the year has passed, came back to find the air turned water dense. I must have gotten lost somehow, I guess. At home the sky was also gone, and there I was trailed closely by the watery air along just within sight, until it up and tore away in fright, when like a fish I gasped, till I could feel the oxygen flow swiftly through my gills. I sighed, got used to water, lost my fear, but all the sky was missing everywhere. Last person I want definitely to talk about is Igor Prikhozhai, who was 38 when he was killed in action in Sumy in November 25. I heard his name before. I didn't know him, unfortunately. But his work struck close to home because I was interested for many years in work of Vladimir Nabokov, and Igor Prikhozhai adopted pen name Igor Sirin in reverence to Vladimir Sirin, which was the young Nabokov's pen name. Not only Nabokov was his admired role model, but Igor did something which not many people attempted. As we all know, Nabokov moved to the United States back in 1940 and became one of the prominent modern English language writers. He was bilingual fully, and he wrote poetry in English, very complex, and that's what was Igor attempting. He was working on translations of English poetry of Vladimir Nabokov into Russian. In addition, he also translated the second book of Alice, young Nabokov 100 years ago, was one of the first translators of Alice in Wonderland into Russian. Igor translated the second book, Through the Looking Glass, and gave us one of the last translations of this book in Nabokov style. And this book we now have in press. We helped to publish it in Culturologist publishing house in Scotland. In addition, as I mentioned, Igor published his own poems, but he also translated Nabokov's poems from English to Russian, including the classic and extremely difficult giant poem, almost 1,000 lines, from the novel Pale Fire. A poem is also called Pale Fire. And on Nabokov's birthday, 22nd April 23, during the first year of full-scale war, Igor completed this translation, and it's all available on YouTube in his channel still. He wrote, working on this translation, regardless, or rather with full regard of the terrible and yet historically momentous time in which, as it turns out, we're living, has brought me incredible pleasure. Here is, to conclude, in translation of Maria Blostein, few lines from Igor's own Russian language poem dedicated to Nabokov and Nabokov's poetry. Isn't to translate, to deal in shadows, then it's all the same. A shadow's shadow, or that of a flame. There's just one thing that shakes my credo. I'm told that fire doesn't cast a shadow. Reference to Pale Fire, the poem by Vladimir Nabokov. This concludes my presentation, and I will be glad to answer any questions regarding this project or any related issues, please.
Я могу сказать?
Yes, please, and I will translate.
Большое спасибо
Марина.
за презентацию. И вы частично ответили на вопросы, которые я приготовила. Вот,
Great,
но я их
great
здесь
thanks for presentations, and you partially already answered the questions that I wanted to ask.
Я поместила их в чат. Здесь они на русском и на английском. Выберите, что вам интересно, и ответьте, пожалуйста.
Marina put the questions in chat, and let me open my chat, and she asks me to answer, to reply to the most recent, to those which I did not. Let me see. I'm looking right now, and if somebody else has more questions, please let me know.
Вы видите их?
Нет, я не вижу сейчас. I don't see them yet.
Victor, I see them, and they are great, great questions.
Okay, if
I'd
you
be
can,
happy to read them out.
yeah,
I would
please voice
great
them for
questions.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And it looks like they've been already translated into English. Is that correct?
Well,
Yes.
chat,
Yeah, the
yeah.
chat translated it. So the
Mhm.
first question is, you are the editor of poetry anthologies, a poet and a translator. This is a hard one too. What matters more to you, the right to a language or responsibility towards those who have suffered at the hands of people who speak Russian? So actually, we have been talking about this both before we went on air and since then, and this is an enduring and fascinating questions. And I believe this is as Pani Okremoshka has already indicated, you've already answered this question largely. But if you would like to elaborate on that.
To some extent, there are several questions here. They're not unrelated, but they're different because Each of us has our individual language, which mother's tongue, which we learned under some circumstances. Some have more than one. Those who have only one, as I do, never have a choice. You cannot completely shed and forget. Well, you can probably, but if we're talking about creative work, poetry in this case, I firmly believe that this ability is rooted in the part of your brain between your ears, to talk positivist way, that you acquired as a child, literally in very early age, definitely before learning reading, definitely before. Through listening and talking, because we learn to speak before we learn to read, at least most of us. That was a joke. But I don't remember how I learned to read. Maybe it was before I spoke. But in any rate, we do not regulate this ability as we can. We can consciously choose the language of conversation. Right now, we're talking all English because that's what we find most convenient without translations. But on our program, in many cases, people speak Russian without indicating that that is their native language, and then we translate from Russian as we do now. Other people choose Ukrainian, then we translate from Ukrainian. This dichotomy, this bilingual story is very different from many others. We have many bilingual people here in the United States, and of course, when they speak, whether they speak English or Spanish, for example, is completely by convenience. So in this case, we have war. War unlike we had in previous wars, at least in Russian history, there never was a choice. I need to remind everyone who doesn't know that, for example, in 1812, in 1 year invasion of Napoleon, Russian officers spoke French to Napoleonic officers because this was the language of aristocracy. They had complete understanding, while many of them wrote beautiful French and very bad Russian. So that's part of that history that has gone completely. When people tell me that during the Second World War, nobody blamed German language, to those people, we again answer that this is not a full analogy in our case, because nobody in countries that fought Germany was German speaking very much, or bilingual in German and their own language, except maybe some areas of Central Europe. But again, our story here is mixed story. Already with our anthology, you can see authors of different legacies, authors whose native is Ukrainian, authors who are fully bilingual, obviously those who come from Ukraine is bilingual, not even and authors who are living across the world and do not use Russian anymore actively, other than language of their childhood / their poetry. So there are different usages here. There are different users. I have an impression that we're rapidly getting into area, not just of turbulence, but area of different possessions. I do not feel my Russian as the language of not only Putin's invaders, but a majority of Russian population today. So the question simply is question of dominant use, just like it was with Aramaic, Greek, Latin, uh, convenience, demography, immigration, mixing. We see this all the time. Marina knows about more than I do about Ukrainian language schools, which now appear in Europe because large populations want this. I'm not very interested, but I would assume that Russian language classes get very low attendance now in Western universities, in American Slavic departments. And these are many different themes. So coming back to this very, very charged question, my responsibility is not so much to the language as to my colleagues, my friends, people who I support in any language. And yes.
I do not mean to dilute the
Sure.
profoundness of what you're saying. I just wanted to add a footnote to this, and I'm so sorry. I thought you were concluding. I wouldn't have interrupted you.
Yeah, I did conclude it.
But I know that there's other literature people in this meeting today, and I think I've always been struck by poets who well, let me just go to my specific example. John Milton, one of the biggest names in British poetry, when he was, I think, like 19, 20 years old, he actually made a choice to write in English, and he wrote this beautiful, I don't know if it's a sonnet, it was a poem about his native language and his relationship with English, in which he was almost apologizing for like having written in Latin and like in other languages. He was making this decision that English is going to be his language. And I only offer that as I think sometimes those of us who are not poets and not translators like me, we sometimes take for granted or forget that there probably is a relationship between the poet and the language that we don't fully understand or appreciate. And so for someone to lose that language, it is grief. I don't know, but my sense from this, just as, so for background, I'm a professor of English medieval literature, but I also obviously work with international literature and other things. But that there is kind of almost in the poem I'm thinking of, it's almost like a sacredness in the relationship between the poet and the language. I see Yana Kane has her hand up, so I'm going to go ahead and yield the floor because I suspect we're going to hear something really quite brilliant.
Yana, please.
Well,
very good observation.
I feel like, oh my God.
Very good observation. Thank you, Katerina.
Well, thank you. I don't know how to live up to this, but I will just share my own experience. So I came to the US at the age of 16, and I was by 2022, I would say I was fairly bilingual in terms of I was writing some poetry in English, some in Russian, sometimes bilingual poems. And what happened to me after Russia invaded Ukraine, I just like lost my ability to write in Russian. And it wasn't because I wanted to. It wasn't. In fact, I do experience it as a loss, because when you, to me at least, writing poetry and translating poetry are very, like what Victor was saying, are very closely linked to kind of almost like physiology. Like, for example, when I walk up the stairs and it's steep stairs, certain kind of poems from Russian from childhood come in and they kind of meter my breath, or there are certain physical experience like frosty morning, as certain lines of Pushkin just come to my mind as a way of experiencing it, or as a way of almost like regulating my breathing according to how it is. And to me, at least, a poem comes from that. My own poem comes from that. And translating comes from a poem regulates some part. It's not necessarily only through meter, but through some images, through something. It almost like regulates my breathing. And so, and when I was writing in both Russian and English, I couldn't tell why a certain poem chose that language, or why some poems, it's like they couldn't decide, and they proceeded in both languages in parallel, and they ended up with roughly the same poem in two languages. So I think that, like somebody was asking, I think Marina was asking, does an author have the right to write about aggression and so on? It's not a matter of right. You write, the poem writes itself. Now, what you do with that poem, do you publish it? Do you not publish it? where do you, how do you share it, in what context, with what conversation around it? That, I think, is under conscious control. And I certainly can't propose any particular rules. But, and the question, like, to Victor is, like, how he decides to put together anthology. I think that it's probably also somewhat more under conscious control. But in terms of what you write and in what language, it's kind of like, can you force yourself to regulate the heartbeat so that in certain situation your heart does not speed up, and in another situation it does speed up? No, I mean, I think you can work with it, you can express it this way or that way, you can edit yourself, but you can't, in my experience at least, and I don't think I'm unique in this regard, I don't think you can you can't write poetry while you can't edit yourself in the process of writing a poem. You can do it kind of in waves. You write and you edit and you come back and write, but that's how it feels to me. Sorry, I'm not sure I said anything particularly
It's beautifully
relevant.
said.
Probably yes. Clear, I don't know.
Many of us, I noticed long time ago that people do not share this type of, you know, this type of activities because for those who write things they understand, and those who don't, it's very hard to put in words. But what you said about physiology is very correct, and it is much like recurrent thoughts or memories that you may have, memories of childhood, which are, linked to specific smells or places. It's imprinting of a kind. You know how they say, it's a common saying among immigrants that flowers in America do not have no smell. That's because your emotion, your sense of smell is imprinted on your grandmother's garden. The same about berries and fruits. It's not the smell, not the taste that you knew first. It's not your first impression. And in many people, this is the same about language. I fully admit that, of course, we do not make up our meters and rhymes and images. They come from what we read and have seen and what we know. Artists cannot invent things. They invent combinations of colors and images, and we invent combinations of words, as I think that's a trite saying from Samuel Coleridge, that poetry is the best words put in best order, something like this. So about languages, yes, Yana has different personal story. You see, I do not have this story, although I learned English as Yana did in school in Russia, but I came here when I was 33, so I was fully, uh, my case is a clear experiment of monolingual person who did not even intend to write any poetry in English, and I gladly admit I don't really, and even cannot translate well because my tools are not enough for this. It's not my profession. It's not something you can repair with artificial intelligence help. No, it's quite opposite. On the other hand, when we write, I will share one more thing, and I can talk about it forever, of course. But what I feel, and I write a lot right now, especially since the full-scale war. My case was opposite. I had an avalanche of poems which came out quite well, I'm told, but they're all based on previous experience of many people. Which created those images and meters before me, uh, starting from direct quotes from different cultures, uh, and to some, let's say, it's like internal pun that is being shared with hundreds of people who know the reference. And that's another dimension which is very hard to do in translation, of course. But let me ask more questions
Victor, yes,
about
I was
the book.
I was going to say,
Yes,
I would like to bring you back because
yes, please.
the other questions posted in the chat by Marina Okremoshka they're great questions. And I'm going to skip the second one, but go to the third one.
Okay.
It's really fascinating. Does an author have the right to write about aggression, Mariupol, or horror if they themselves have not been under fire in a basement or in captivity? Where is the boundary between one's own voice and the pain of a victim of aggression? This is a great question.
I can answer right away. In my opinion, there is no boundary. One can write in any language about anything. The question is the product, the result. If something written by somewhere 1,000 miles or 1,000 years away from you, we can write right now about biblical events in the language which biblical people would not understand. But it could be so powerful, using correct words in correct order, that it's not so much your own experience as linking your means of expression to your depth of emotion. Of course, and the opposite is true. People who experience the horrors of war most likely will not write about them. They have very different situation and things to do.
It's interesting. It's interesting.
Both cases are rare. If something goes through, take for example, in our cases, our language, our story of Russian language has been immensely influenced by Western Europe, specifically German and French, English much less. Marina Tsvetaeva, one of the most prominent authors, was fascinated by Napoleon, was distressed personally by the story of Napoleon's son. And what she wrote about this, of course, she never lived in Napoleonic times, but her emotions probably are not more shallow than emotions of contemporaries. And she's remote from this place, so she had maybe more distant, objective view. I don't know. There are different combinations here. It all boils down to personal abilities and talent in any kind of language expression. I don't think, but you asked about right. Right is ethical issue.
Right, because like the idea would be something like the analogy is, and this may be and just full disclosure to our viewers, I am the least educated on this panel, and so my comments are not always particularly productive. But like there, for example, in English language, we have this concept of stolen valor. If someone talks about their misrepresents their experience on the battlefield or claims to be part of a battle that they were not part of, and reaps benefits from that. Veteran benefits for someone who's not actually been served in the military capacity, or people who've exaggerated. Like there's this concept of stolen valor. So I'm wondering if that applies. I think maybe that's part of the question. Do you get to write about the frontline horrors if you haven't experienced them? But then also at the same time, a lot of these poems are not about frontline horrors. Although the one I'm looking right now at, the Irina Yurchuk poem translated by Olga oh goodness. Like that does seem to be of a soldier dying in a ditch someplace. But that soldier is never going to write that poem. So is it perhaps a service to put into words the agony and the terror and the horror? Maybe that is a service a poet can provide to give voice to someone who is never going to be able to voice their experience. So I can see it both ways, the stolen valor and the giving voice to the voiceless. And then I guess the third thing I would add to that, so many of these poems that we've seen are not about the battlefield horror. They're about grief. Like the one we had, oh my goodness, that a poem. I'm still processing the poem about the children. Where was
Yes.
that? The Living War's Immortal Children, the Fabrikant, Boris Fabrikant's poem.
Yes, yes.
Like I'm still trying to figure that one out. You know, are these the children that were killed, or are these the people whose childhoods are gone? And it will take me a long time to appreciate, and I'm looking forward after we finish, and it will be tearful because I think, as you said, these are not poems you can read without emotion. These poems they will affect you. In any case, so there's the battlefield poetry, but there's also the poetry of loss of love, loss of innocence, loss of home. The one about the fish. Oh Lord, I apologize for my memories being so bad, but you just talked about the fish. The sky's gone. The fish. The person is like a fish gas. Like that's a loss of everything that person's reality had been until the war. So I think those experiences. We see. So to summarize, the question for me would be, is writing about battlefield horror in the category of stolen valor, or is it in giving voice to the voiceless? And then with the understanding that there's horrors of war are not limited to the battlefield. Your daily life is over. And like in those poems, like, is that a different category? So I'm sorry for all that. That's a lot of words.
It's a lot of, yeah, I see Yana's question, but let me just conclude here. The example of this poem by Boris Fabrikant, who lives for many years in the United Kingdom, but he's from Ukraine, he's from Lviv, and he's bilingual. This poem originally was written both in Russian and English and Ukrainian. He has both versions. We are publishing Ukrainian version in new volume. So it's not just as Marina says in the question, right of the ethical right of writing about it, but also the choice of language here. And for a bilingual person, of course, they may choose both languages consciously. Again, it's a very complicated issue, and I do not claim to resolve it, but in our situation, we're in position to document it. Just like this podcast is chronicle documentation of rapidly evolving events, our books, translations, and others are documenting something which did not literally exist a few years ago, and we have no idea how things will develop in the future. We have dead cultures, we have dead languages, we had everything in the history. Not even talking about wars. Yana, please.
So I guess well, I'll comment and then I'll ask a question. My comment is that, to me, stolen valor implies that a person makes a claim to have, let's say, been in a war or be a survivor or something that they didn't actually experience directly. So I think that doing that is definitely completely unethical. But now I'm going to ask Victor, kind of an extension of the question which starts with you, the editor of poetry anthologies. And I would say that in a certain way, this whole MUkraine podcast, so maybe everybody, Victor as well as Katerina, and everybody really who is involved in putting together this program, it's also a kind of you're creating a kind of anthology, not of poetry alone, but of expressions of people telling stories, really, from all kinds of experiences, etc. So how do you decide? Do you have rules? Do you go by gut feel of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate? So maybe starting with the anthologies, but maybe for MUkraine as well.
No, that's a really good point that you made about how and perhaps the stolen valor thing was it is an extreme example, but you made a really good point. That's a willful misrepresentation. That is it. And I guess so as you and when you pointed that out, it made me realize, well, isn't all of literature, your storytelling, isn't anybody who writes anything fictional, whether it be poetry or prose, is almost the nature of creative writing itself is not claiming that it's the opposite of stolen valor. You're not claiming anything. You're creating an artistic work. You're creating a work of art that somehow is going to connect or reflect reality or help people understand things. And so it's a very different thing from the start. The minute you said that there's an intentional misrepresentation or something like that with stolen valor, I realized that that was the wrong way to elaborate on the question posted in the chat.
Okay, I wasn't trying to criticize you in any way.
No. This is the whole point. We love this. We love discussion. This is. I mean, this is just absolutely fascinating. And how? I mean, what a wonderful opportunity to talk about just important things from different perspectives with educated people. This is a wonderful thing. I'm very grateful.
Right. Okay.
That's exactly what I wanted to say, because the more Yana asked about connections between the imagery of anthology and this particular podcast itself, which of course none of us projected developing in 227 weeks. I have mixed feelings here, but one thing right now clear, that I do not want to stop. We do not have any date in mind. We're going along with events which unfold. And I mentioned Lewis Carroll today in one of his less known works called Sylvia and Bruno. There is a parody of a German geographer who invented a most detailed map in the world with scale 1:1. But of course, you need the entire Earth to unfold this map. So we are trying to follow. On one hand, what we are doing is probably oral archive. On the other hand, it's archive of developing events. It's what was called Chronicle of Current Events in our youth. It was underground publication by dissidents in the Soviet Union. So it's our feeling, that I hope we share it, that every moment brings changes. When I wake up every day, I look in the news, it's like not living in someone's dream, but it's my own mind which coincides with the world, and we try to carry some of this we choose what we can. But answering to Yana's practical question, how do we choose? I think it's both lucky coincidence that we have number of connections developed over these 4 years. We have people coming back, willing to come back in all 3 languages. We want people who want to come back. One thing I think we do not want and do not call for anymore are memoirs, are memories of someone, let's say, who lived in Odessa or Kyiv back in the 60s or 70s. This is old time. And these people usually are interesting, but they're not priority right now. We want someone reporting on things which did not exist before, on war itself, on developments on regular life. And of course, since we prefer English speakers, our speakers are limited to educated people who can express themselves in English, and we're so amazed to find so many people across the world and from Ukraine who can just come and talk. I keep reminding myself, that we intend to talk to regular people who do not know much about Eastern Europe, its history, above all literature. So it's like a series of educational lectures, ongoing seminar, if you wish. And your contribution, Yana, and your colleagues from translator group are so amazingly good that I was very glad that Yana wants to come back and bring people from across the world, from Germany and UK and Canada, and we will have several more, I hope, Kapilka, including Andrei Kostinsky, who was mentioned before, and others. And in the new volume, I didn't mention, there are 2 interviews that Yana took recorded with Andrei Kostinsky and Dmitry Bliznyuk, the 2 prominent Ukrainian poets right now. So there is a lot of projects which sprout other projects and connections, a lot of horizontal connections. We have prominent experts on Ukraine, on different areas, historians and culturologists who want to come back. We'll have this month Vitaly Chernetsky, who is the president of Shevchenko Society, University of Kansas. We will have Alexander Motil from New Jersey, from Rutgers, and they know us already, and somehow we want to record these opinions, these changes. That's all I can say right now. Probably it goes beyond books or personal careers, of course, but it seems hodgepodge. It seems not very organized, but if you look, just scroll through our 200 plus hours, I hope it will be useful and preserved archive.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and we are beyond our regular time. So, Marina, do you have any more questions, please? If you wish.
Danke schön, merci beaucoup, thanks.
You're welcome. Welcome, and thank you for coming at Friday evening from Switzerland, and thank you everyone. And I will ask Katerina to say a few words on this day of national mourning after yesterday bombing to our friends in Ukraine.
Дорогі браття і сестри в Україні, ми зберігаємо вас в наших щоденних думках і молитвах. Нехай милосердний Бог тримає вас у своїй опіці. До наступного тижня. Прощаємося.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!